The Feeling Code. Introduction. You wake up, check your phone, scroll through messages, open a news app, watch a video, buy something online that you didn't plan to buy, eat what's in front of you, post a thought you didn't fully think through. And in every moment you say, I chose this, but did you? There's a deeper game being played, quietly, invisibly, beneath your every decision. A game where the rules were written long before you knew how to spell your name. A game where you're not just a player, you're a piece. We like to believe we are rational, autonomous beings. We write books about free will, preach about independence, and design systems of law and morality that hinge on the idea that we are sovereign over our choices. But science disagrees, psychology disagrees, history screams otherwise. Most of what you think, feel, and choose is not born from your conscious mind. It is triggered, guided, even scripted by forces that remain unseen. Social cues, inherited beliefs, neurochemical patterns, authority figures, algorithms, childhood traumas, and the soft repetition of ideas designed to sound like your own voice. Welcome to the theater of the mind. You are not just the audience, you are the stage. You are the puppet. And yes, you may also be the hand if you learn to see. This audiobook is not comfortable. It is not motivational fluff, and it won't pat you on the back with vague affirmations. It is a blueprint, a weapon, a mirror. You'll learn how influence works, how it's embedded in every conversation, every headline, every ad, every smile. You'll learn how desire is decoded, how fear is engineered, how entire civilizations are directed like marionettes, one dopamine hit at a time. But more importantly, you'll learn how to see it, because awareness is liberation. Once you understand the mechanisms of influence, once you see the strings, you're no longer just reacting. You're no longer a prisoner of invisible hands. You can choose your direction. You can decode others. You can decide what to believe, whom to trust, what to say. And when silence is more powerful than speech, that doesn't make you manipulative, it makes you awake. But here's the uncomfortable truth. With great awareness comes great responsibility. The moment you see how the puppet strings work, you'll be tempted to use them, not just to protect yourself, but to get what you want. This audiobook doesn't pretend to be morally neutral. It asks the hard question, if influence is a tool, who deserves to hold it? You? The corporation? The priest? The politician? The parent? And what happens when someone uses that influence without your consent? That's the war being waged every second of every day. Not with bombs, not with bullets, but with ideas delivered in memes, ads, scripts, and suggestions. Whoever controls the narrative controls the mind, and whoever controls the mind controls the world. You are not powerless, you are programmable, but you are also the programmer. This is your invitation to step behind the curtain, to enter the psychological operating system that runs everything you see, hear, buy, believe, and become. This is not just a journey into the mind. This is the map out of the maze, so take a breath. Let go of what you think you know, and prepare to meet the hidden hand behind your every move. It's not what you expected. It never is. Chapter 1. The Illusion of Free Will. You walk into a store. You're presented with 3 types of bottled water. One is branded as Pure Icelandic Glacial Spring. One says, Enhanced Electrolytes for Energy, and the last just reads, Filtered Water. You choose the glacial one. Why? Because it's purer? Because Iceland sounds clean? Because you saw a commercial last week that made you feel something when a slow-motion waterfall hit the screen? Or maybe because the bottle was placed at eye level? The truth is uncomfortable. Your choice may not have been yours at all. We live in the illusion of choice. But choice is not freedom if the options are manipulated. Free will becomes a performance when the stage is rigged. Neuroscience tells us that decisions are made before we're aware we made them. The brain prepares for action milliseconds or even seconds before your conscious mind thinks it made a decision. In a study by neuroscientist Benjamin Libet, brain scans revealed that people's brains decided to move before the person felt they chose to. Free will, then, is not a lever. It's a light that flickers on after the machinery has already turned. This is not a call to despair. It's a call to awareness. Because once you see that your conscious self is often the last to know, you begin to reclaim your power, not by denying your programming, but by understanding it. So how does the programming happen? Let's start with what Daniel Kahneman called System 1 and System 2. System 1 is fast, emotional, and instinctive. It's the part of you that flinches when someone raises a hand or smiles when you hear your name. It jumps to conclusions, fills in gaps, and reacts before the facts arrive. System 2 is slower, analytical, and deliberate. It's the part that does math, evaluates options, and plans for the future. But System 2 is lazy. It takes effort, energy, and in most cases, your brain delegates decisions to System 1 because it's faster, easier, and less mentally expensive. That's why advertisers, politicians, and influencers target System 1. They don't want you to think. They want you to feel, to associate, to react, to absorb ideas without resistance. Think about this. Why do fast food chains use red and yellow? Red triggers hunger. Yellow sparks attention and urgency. These colors weren't chosen because they look nice. They were chosen because they bypass your rational filter and go straight to your subconscious. Or consider the layout of a grocery store. Essentials like milk and eggs are placed at the back, not for convenience, but to make you walk past every aisle. That journey triggers impulses, associations, and cravings. You thought you came in for milk. You walk out with a bag full of choices you never truly chose. This is not limited to products. It happens in your relationships, in politics, in religion, in the stories you were told as a child. All of them install patterns, beliefs you mistake for your own, values you never questioned, roles you quietly stepped into without even realizing. Most people are not victims, but they are unaware. And in a world that understands how to guide the unaware, ignorance is not innocence, it's vulnerability. This is the uncomfortable truth. Your mind is not a fortress, it's a sponge. You are not as rational as you believe. You are a pattern recognition machine trained by repetition and emotion. What feels like intuition is often just conditioning. What feels like truth is often just familiarity. We've seen this on a mass scale. Entire nations mobilized for war through carefully designed propaganda. Societies torn apart by slogans, symbols, and sound bites. A single phrase, repeated enough times, becomes indistinguishable from reality. The 20th century proved this with chilling efficiency. Orwell wasn't just writing fiction, he was warning us. But this isn't just about governments or corporations, it's about your every day. The friend who gossips to win your trust, the social media feed that mirrors your biases, the co-worker who flatters you before asking for a favor, the dating app that keeps you swiping not to help you connect, but to keep you addicted. These aren't coincidences. They are engineered experiences. And unless you slow down, unless you activate your System 2, you'll never know whether you are living your life or simply being lived through. So, what's the solution? It begins with one word: awareness. You don't need to become paranoid, but you do need to become conscious. Ask questions before reacting. Pause before choosing. Track the origin of your beliefs. Who gave them to you? What emotions are being triggered? Why do you desire what you desire? This is not easy work. Your ego will resist. Your mind will seek shortcuts. Your habits will scream for comfort. But that discomfort is the door. Because once you realize how many of your preferences were planted, once you see how many of your opinions are echoes, once you feel how many of your decisions were made for you, then, and only then, can you begin the real work of reclaiming your mind. Free will isn't a given, it's a skill. You don't wake up with it. You wake up to it. And the moment you do, the world starts to look very different. You begin to notice the fingerprints behind the scenes. You start to hear the script before it's spoken. You spot the trick before the magician waves his hand. You don't become immune, but you do become aware. And that awareness, it changes everything. Chapter 2. The Desire Decoder. You are not moved by logic, you are moved by hunger. Not just physical hunger, though that too. You hunger for recognition, for security, for love, for power, for the purpose. Every action you take, every word you speak, every product you buy and belief you hold is, at its root, a response to desire. Influencers, politicians, brands, cults, religious leaders, even well-meaning mentors, none of them truly control people through facts. They control people through desire. Because desire bypasses logic, it pulls, it whispers, it seduces. If you want to understand how the world influences you, you must understand what you want. But here's the paradox. Most people don't know what they want. Not really. They think they do. They say, I want to be successful. I want to find love. I want to make an impact. But success, love, and impact are containers. The real question is, what do those containers hold for you? Let's decode. Every desire, no matter how sophisticated it looks on the surface, can be traced back to a handful of primal human motivations. I call this framework the desire decoder. It breaks down human motivation into 6 root-level desires. Once you learn to see them, you will understand not only yourself, but everyone around you. And more importantly, you'll understand how you're being influenced every day. Let's explore each. 1. Survival. The most ancient and urgent. Food, shelter, protection from danger. Much of modern marketing still plays this game by triggering a sense of lack or threat. Insurance commercials, alarm systems, health products, political campaigns that stoke fear about the economy, war, or the other side. They all hook into your survival instinct. If something makes you feel unsafe, unprepared, or exposed, it bypasses your reasoning and triggers your primal brain. Once your nervous system is activated, your logic goes offline. 2. Security, closely related to survival, but more emotional. Security is about stability, predictability, control over your environment. People crave routines, clear answers, long-term plans, financial consistency, and emotional safety. This is why brands say things like, trusted by millions, backed by science, guaranteed results. And it's why conspiracy theories are so attractive to some. Paradoxically, they offer a sense of control, a way to make sense of chaos, even if the theory itself is irrational. When the world feels unpredictable, people will cling to any narrative that provides structure, even if it's built on lies. 3. Status. Humans are hierarchical by nature. Even those who claim not to care about status want to matter. Status isn't just about wealth or fame. It's about being seen, respected, and admired. It's about being somebody in a world full of noise. Social media thrives on this desire. Every like, follower, and view taps into the status mechanism. You post not just to share, but to be validated. Brands know this. That's why luxury items exist. You don't buy a Rolex to tell time. You buy it to signal. To say, I'm successful, I matter, I'm not like the others. This isn't vanity, it's biology. Status is tribal. In ancestral times, low status meant vulnerability. High status meant safety and access. So when someone or something offers you a shortcut to feeling important, you listen. 4. Sexuality. Desire is not always conscious. In fact, most of the time it isn't. Sexual energy is one of the most powerful tools in advertising and influence, not because people are lustful per se, but because sexuality is associated with vitality, youth, power, and relevance. Even non-sexual products are marketed with sexual undertones. Cars, shoes, cologne, energy drinks. Not because you'll get laid, but because the promise of attraction is embedded in the image. If something makes you feel attractive, or makes you feel like attractive people use it, it sells. This is also why people are drawn to charismatic leaders. It's not always about what they say. It's about the energy they radiate, a magnetism that speaks to the root of our instinctual wiring. 5. Significance beyond status. There is meaning. The desire not just to be seen, but to matter. This is the engine behind spiritual movements, purpose-driven brands, and heroic causes. People want to believe they were born for more than just existing, that their pain has meaning, that their journey fits into a larger story, Great influencers don't sell products, they sell purpose. They don't say, buy this. They say, join this. Be part of something bigger. Fulfill your destiny. And once you believe you've found your higher path, your resistance drops. You'll sacrifice time, money, even relationships for meaning. 6. Story. This is the master key. Because all the other desires are embedded in the story. We don't operate on logic. We operate on narratives. You are not just a person. You are the main character in a movie playing inside your mind. And every influence that enters your life tries to rewrite your script. Some tell you you're a victim. Others tell you you're a warrior. Some tell you to fear. Others tell you to rise. But make no mistake, every form of persuasion is a battle for your story. Once someone inserts themselves into your story as the mentor, the rescuer, the authority, the lover, you listen. And if they frame someone else as the villain, you obey. So what does all this mean? If you want to reclaim your mind, you must learn to read your desires before someone else does. Every ad, every suggestion, every movement, it's not speaking to your logic, it's speaking to your hunger, to a desire you may not have words for, but that drives you nonetheless. Ask yourself, which of these 6 desires is being triggered right now? Is this voice trying to make me feel unsafe? Is it offering me status? Is it seducing me with a sense of meaning? You don't have to reject desire. Desire is not the enemy, but unconscious desire is. Because until you decode what you truly want, you'll remain vulnerable to anyone who pretends to give it to you. You'll chase shadows. You'll follow voices that aren't your own. You'll trade your soul for a dopamine hit. But when you decode desire, when you name the thing that pulls you, you take the first step from puppet to master. And that step, that's where the real freedom begins. Chapter 3. Narratives that control minds. They say the truth sets you free, but in the real world it's not the truth that rules. It's the story. Facts are sterile, cold, often inconvenient. But a story wraps around your heart like fire. It makes sense of your chaos. It doesn't argue. It feels right. And when something feels right, we let it in without resistance. We like to imagine that logic drives our choices, that we follow reason like a compass. But watch closely. People don't act based on data. They act based on meaning. And meaning is delivered in narrative form. Everything that matters to you, your identity, your beliefs, your ambitions, is shaped by the stories you were told and the ones you keep telling yourself. These stories are not entertainment. They are mental architecture. They are the scaffolding on which your reality is built. From childhood, you were surrounded by stories, myths, fairy tales, religious parables, family legends. Each one carried a coded message. Be good and you'll be rewarded. Obey or you'll be punished. Stray too far and you'll suffer. These weren't just bedtime tales. They were psychological scripts, frameworks for belonging. Behavioral instruction is hidden inside a tale of dragons, gods, or heroes, and they never stopped. As you grew up, the stories changed shape, but not structure. Now they arrive in the form of political slogans, brand campaigns, self-help mantras, and viral content. Every narrative tells you what's wrong with the world, who's to blame, and who can save you. That formula is eternal. A hero, a villain, a guide, and a promised transformation. And the most powerful trick of all, the story makes you the hero. You are framed as the one who can rise, who can awaken, who can fight back. But first, you must accept the rest of the cast. There is a threat. There is an enemy. There is a broken system that only this one product, leader, movement, or method can fix. Buy this. Vote for that. Follow me. Join us. This is how the narrative claims your attention. And once it has your attention, it shapes your beliefs. We are not persuaded by logic, we are seduced by drama. You've seen it play out again and again. A charismatic figure doesn't present a spreadsheet. They tell a story. They paint a picture of struggle and triumph, of enemies and destiny. And even when the facts are thin, the narrative sticks, because it makes sense of our pain. It gives our confusion a cause. It offers a villain we can point at, and a vision we can follow. That's not logic, that's psychological alchemy. It works because the brain craves structure. It hates ambiguity. It wants to reduce the overwhelming complexity of life into something it can grasp. And stories deliver exactly that: order, direction, meaning, a place to belong and a path to walk. The danger, of course, is that not all stories are told in good faith. History is filled with examples of stories turned into weapons. Stories that gave people permission to hate, to destroy, to kill. Stories that reframed atrocities as duty, genocide as purification, war as peace. These weren't acts of madness. They were acts of narrative obedience. And that same structure still operates today, only now it's quieter, faster, more subtle. You open your phone and scroll, and without knowing it, you're being cast in stories over and over again. Some say you're oppressed, others say you're special. Some paint you as a victim, others make you the chosen one. Each narrative whispers, "Believe me, and everything will make sense." But what if the story isn't true? That's the question most people never ask. Because the moment a story gives them purpose, identity, and someone to blame, truth becomes irrelevant. Emotion overrules fact. Familiarity overrules scrutiny. And anyone who challenges the narrative becomes the new villain. This is how ideologies harden, how echo chambers form, how entire populations can be mobilized to support things that, under different circumstances, they'd never tolerate. Because when you're inside a story that feels true, you stop asking if it is true. And make no mistake, those who understand narrative hold power over those who do not. They don't need to lie. They simply need to frame, to choose the beginning and end, to define who's good and who's evil, to insert themselves as the guide. Once the frame is set, everything else follows. This is the real battlefield. Not between left and right, rich and poor, science and faith, but between competing stories. And if you don't consciously choose your story, you will unconsciously live someone else's. So, how do you protect yourself? You begin by slowing down. You train your mind to spot the structure before falling for the content. You learn to ask dangerous questions. Who is the hero in this story? Who's the villain? What emotion is this triggering in me? What version of myself is this narrative inviting me to become? And why? Because stories are never neutral. They either make you more conscious or more controllable. And the most seductive stories are the ones that feel like your own thoughts, the ones that use your pain as leverage, your longing as bait, your confusion as a hook. You were never just a listener. You were always the target. But that doesn't mean you're doomed to be manipulated. You can reclaim the author's pen. You can step back and say, "This story isn't mine. I choose differently." Because once you see the narrative, it loses its grip. Once you question the plot, you begin to write a new one. And that's where the real freedom begins, not in finding a better story, but in knowing you were never just a character. You were always the storyteller. Chapter 4. Language is a weapon. Words are more than just noises. It's a spell. The frequency you release into the world each time you speak has the power to injure or awaken, enslave or free, influence or motivate. "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me," goes the proverb. However, that statement has always been a lie, delivered in a humorous way. Language doesn't simply describe the world, it creates it. This truth, though easy to overlook, is the most potent secret known by every great influencer, dictator, spiritual leader, branding expert, or cult figure throughout history. Control the language, and you control the mind. Because language is the architecture of thought. The very process of thinking, what you name, what you feel, what you believe, is shaped and limited by the words available to you. If you can't name an emotion, you can't understand it. If you can't describe an idea, you can't defend it. And if you cannot frame your experience, someone else will do it for you. And the moment they do, they own your perception. Language is never neutral. Its structure and timing can bypass logic and speak directly to the subconscious. It's not just about what's said. It's about how it's said, when, and why. Governments don't say they're spying. They say they're ensuring national security. Corporations don't fire. They downsize. Militaries don't kill civilians. They deal with collateral damage. These are not harmless substitutions. They are linguistic anesthetics, numbing the moral response and normalizing violence or neglect. They are carefully chosen to create distance between action and accountability. Over time, they dull your senses, and you stop asking questions. You stop feeling the weight of the reality those words attempt to disguise. This phenomenon isn't limited to public discourse. It infects our private minds as well. You tell yourself you're not angry, just tired. Not afraid, just not ready. Not manipulated, just going with the flow. These are not confessions. They're euphemisms, polished lies you whisper to avoid confronting your own vulnerability. But avoidance builds illusion, and illusion repeated becomes the reality you live inside. One of the most powerful tools of language is repetition, not because it convinces, but because it conditions. Repetition doesn't make something true, it makes it familiar, and in the subconscious mind, what's familiar begins to feel true. This is why propaganda works, why slogans echo in our heads long after they leave the screen. Just do it, because you're worth it. Make America great again. Yes, we can. These aren't reasoned arguments, they're emotional implants. They worm into your mind through rhythm and familiarity. Hear something enough times and your resistance fades, not because you've been persuaded, but because you've been worn down. Emotion starts to replace inquiry. Familiarity replaces truth. There is another kind of linguistic weapon, even more subtle: metaphor. Metaphors don't just explain, they shape perception. They act as Trojan horses for belief. We say, time is money, so we guard our minutes like dollars. We say, life is a battle, so we brace ourselves for constant struggle. We call someone cold, and we stop expecting warmth. Metaphors slip past the rational mind and restructure the subconscious. They don't ask for permission. They frame your reality before you realize you've accepted the terms. The most dangerous metaphors are the ones you don't know you're living inside. And the scariest part, there's no such thing as just a word. Every word carries a vibration, a memory, a history. Words have been used to build temples and justify genocide, to liberate minds and to enslave them. What one culture calls freedom, another calls chaos. What one era calls progress, another may call decay. Language is soaked in the values of the people who shape it, and so when someone tells you don't overthink it, it's just semantics. Understand what they're really saying. Don't question the spell I've cast. Today, language is being engineered with scientific precision. Take neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, a system that studies how language patterns influence mental states. It's used in sales, politics, therapy, and manipulation. A simple sentence like where you might start to notice how confident you feel isn't just casual speech. It's a planted seed, a guided suggestion. It doesn't argue, it invites. The resistance is bypassed, and the idea takes root before you even realize it's been offered. This isn't magic, but it's close. When language is wielded without awareness, it becomes a tool of control. And when it's consumed passively, it becomes a weapon turned against you. That's why your defense must be conscious listening. Not paranoid, not reactive, but observant. If a message instantly triggers a strong emotion, pause. If something sounds too clean, too polished, too persuasive, pause again. Ask yourself what's missing. What's being assumed? What metaphors are framing your thoughts? Who stands to benefit if you believe what you're hearing? This doesn't mean you need to stop trusting people, but it does mean you must start trusting your ability to decode them. Because when you no longer question the language being fed to you, you're no longer thinking, you're being thought through. Language is the interface between your mind and the world. The words you accept shape your reality. The words you speak shape others. Every phrase is a programming tool. Every sentence is a selection of commands. So speak like a surgeon, listen like a detective, think like a poet. In a world where words are used to confuse, to divide, to sedate, clarity is rebellion. Words are not symbols. They are tools. They are maps. They are mirrors. And yes, when used without care, they are weapons. Wield yours wisely. Chapter 5. Creating the Villain. Every powerful story needs a villain, not just a problem to solve, but a face to hate, a scapegoat, a shadow that justifies your rage, your fear, your loyalty. Without a villain, the story lacks tension. Without an enemy, the hero has no direction. And without someone to blame, people are forced to confront something far more uncomfortable, the truth. That may be the problem. It is within. But the human psyche resists that truth. We don't want introspection, we want projection. It's easier, cleaner, more emotionally satisfying. So we create the villain. History is a blood-stained archive of this pattern. Religions create devils, nations create enemies, movements create oppressors. Even self-help gurus create negative people you must cut out. We're always being told, you're fine, it's them. And when we believe it, we no longer have to change. We no longer have to examine our complicity, our blindness, or our shadow. The process is simple. First, a source of discomfort or uncertainty is introduced, something vague but real. Economic hardship, social change, a pandemic, technological disruption. Next, someone appears to name the discomfort, to explain it with clarity and certainty. But instead of offering a complex, nuanced view, they give you something far more seductive, a face. This group is to blame. This ideology is destroying everything. Those people want to take what's yours. They hate you. And just like that, your anxiety has a target. This isn't always done with malicious intent. Sometimes the villainization happens unconsciously. Sometimes it's a product of pain. But the results are the same: unity through division. Tribal identity forged in mutual contempt. The illusion of strength is built on shared hatred. Because that's what a villain does in the story. Not just threaten the hero, but bind the tribe. The presence of a common enemy gives people a sense of belonging, a sense of moral clarity. It divides the world into clean categories: good and evil, us and them, truth and lies. The world becomes easier to navigate because you don't need to think anymore. You just need to fight, and fight we do. Online, in the streets, in families, over dinner tables and phone screens. We become foot soldiers in wars we don't understand, repeating slogans we didn't write, hating people we've never met. All because someone gave us a villain and made us feel righteous for despising them. But here's the truth no one wants to say. Most villains are manufactured. Not entirely fictional, but exaggerated, reframed, weaponized. Real flaws, real groups, real disagreements, distorted and amplified until they become monstrous caricatures. Until every nuance is erased and every conversation becomes a battleground. When we create villains, we stop seeing people. We start seeing projections, archetypes, threats. And once that shift happens, any action becomes justifiable. Censorship, surveillance, humiliation, violence, all in the name of defense, of justice, of preserving what matters. That's how genocide begins. Not with guns, but with language. With the slow dehumanization of them. With the steady drip of rhetoric that turns neighbors into enemies and citizens into executioners. The hand that casts the first stone always believes it is righteous, always believes it is protecting something sacred. And yet, this dynamic isn't confined to politics or war. It plays out in subtle ways every day. In workplaces where one employee is scapegoated to preserve the illusion of order. In families where one person becomes the problem, the system can avoid change. In relationships where blame is externalized instead of understood. Creating the villain is a defense mechanism, a way to preserve our self-image, our worldview, our power. But in doing so, we trade complexity for control. We trade growth for certainty. And we lose the ability to see others as human. The tragedy is, the person offering the villain usually presents themselves as the savior. They say, "Follow me, I'll protect you from them." And so we hand over our autonomy in exchange for safety. We silence our doubts in exchange for clarity. And without realizing it, we become puppets in someone else's moral theater. So what do? We begin by refusing to play the game. We resist the temptation to flatten people into villains. We stay with the discomfort of complexity. We admit that not all threats wear uniforms or carry flags. Some are invisible, some live within, and some are projections of our own unresolved pain. We ask harder questions. What is this narrative asking me to hate? Who benefits if I believe in this enemy? What part of me is seeking justification through blame? What fear is being soothed by this convenient shadow? Because once you see the villain creation mechanism, you start to notice it everywhere. And when you notice it, you are no longer caught in it. You can still stand for something. You can still fight for the truth, but you do it with eyes open and heart intact, not as a reaction to fear, but as a response to awareness. And that awareness changes everything. Because the moment you refuse to hate the villain you've been handed, you break the spell. And in that moment, you stop being a character in someone else's story. You become the author of your own. Chapter 6. The Invisible Architects. You think you're making your own choices. You think you're the one at the wheel. But what if the road, the signs, the destination, and even the illusion of choice itself have all been designed by someone else? Not a single person. Not a secret cabal in a smoky room. But a system. A pattern. A network of silent architects shaping your thoughts, desires, and behavior without your knowledge. And the most terrifying part, they don't need to control you directly. They just need to design the environment. Your mind is not a closed system. It responds to cues. It follows signals. It adapts to rewards and avoids punishment. And in an age where everything is tracked, measured, and optimized, those cues are no longer natural. They are engineered. Every scroll, every click, every like, every pause, every hesitation of your thumb on a glowing screen feeds a digital mirror of your mind into systems that don't forget. These systems don't just predict what you'll do next, they shape it. You don't see the architects, but they see you. Not your soul, not your full humanity, but your data, your patterns, your emotional triggers. And that's all they need. They don't need to silence you. They just need to distract you, flood your world with noise, feed you with endless novelty, reward your dopamine, numb your awareness, keep you inside loops so tight you mistake them for freedom. You believe you're choosing what to watch, what to read, what to care about. But what if your interest was planted by an algorithm that noticed your hesitation, fed you one more post, and watched your brain light up? What if that one video led you down a spiral, not because you sought truth, but because the system learned that fear keeps you engaged? This isn't dystopian fiction. This is your feed. This is your search bar. This is the recommendation engine that knows your secrets better than your friends do. It's not evil in the cartoonish sense. It's not plotting your downfall. But it is optimizing for one thing, your attention. Not your growth, not your peace, not your awakening, just attention. Because attention is currency. And whoever owns your attention owns your mind. And so, the architects build worlds around you, invisible architectures of persuasion. They decide what you see, what you don't see, what rises to the surface and what sinks in the algorithmic ocean. They whisper what's trending. They control the default options. They curate the acceptable. They normalize the absurd. And over time, without force or threat, they shift entire cultures. Beliefs change not through debate, but through design. Ideas become dominant not because they win arguments, but because they're baked into the infrastructure, and the infrastructure is invisible. This is the genius of the architects. They don't need to tell you what to believe. They just need to control the flow of what you're exposed to. That's how truth becomes optional. That's how outrage becomes addictive. That's how distraction becomes identity. You wake up in a digital ecosystem tailored to your fears, calibrated to your cravings, engineered to reward your worst habits and discourage your deepest questions. And all the while you think you're just scrolling, just choosing, just staying informed. But the walls are closing in, and they're padded with comfort. The scariest prisons don't have bars. They have endless freedom inside narrow boundaries. They let you explore every room, except the one where you realize the whole building was designed to keep you asleep. So who are these architects? They are not always villains. Some are engineers, some are marketers, some are behavioral scientists with no moral compass. Some are governments, Some are billion-dollar corporations. Some are machine learning models that no one fully understands anymore. They don't need to conspire. They don't need to agree. They only need to follow the logic of the system, grow engagement, optimize for time, maximize return. And in that silent pursuit of metrics, your inner world is shaped, without consent, without awareness, without resistance. But here's the truth you must hold on to. You are not powerless. Once you see the architecture, you can begin to change your relationship to it. You can begin to notice the nudges, pause before reacting, ask, who benefits if I believe this? Who profits from my anger? Who wins if I stay distracted? You can choose to step out of the loop, not completely, because we all live inside systems, but consciously. You can begin to rebuild your attention, reclaim your silence, rewire your awareness. And in doing so, you weaken the grip of the invisible hands that want you passive, impulsive, and predictable. This is not about paranoia. It's about presence. The architects don't fear your rage. They fear your clarity. They fear your ability to unplug, not from technology, but from the mental sleep it creates. Because once you awaken from the designed trance, once you begin to choose what you consume, and more importantly, what you don't, once you stop being a user and start being a creator, you disrupt the pattern. And in a world run by invisible systems, awareness is rebellion. Chapter 7. The Ethics of Influence. At some point in your journey through the hidden architecture of influence, you will come to a crossroads, a quiet, unavoidable moment where the question no longer is, how does this work? But rather, what will I do with it? Because now you know. You've seen how people are guided without knowing, persuaded without awareness, manipulated with words, stories, and invisible algorithms. You've seen how fear is triggered, desire is hijacked, and truth is reframed. And this knowledge, once seen, doesn't go away. It sharpens your perception. It gives you power. And with power comes the burden that every conscious person must face. Just because I can influence, should I? Influence itself is not evil. In fact, it's inevitable. Every conversation you have, every story you tell, and every choice you model is a form of influence. You can't not influence. The only question is, are you doing it consciously, ethically, and with care? Or are you slipping into the same dark theater you've now learned to recognize? There is a fine line between persuasion and manipulation, between guidance and control, between serving others and using them. And that line isn't always visible. What starts as inspiration can become domination. What begins as clarity can twist into coercion. The human ego is clever. It knows how to justify control under the mask of helping. It tells itself, I'm doing this for their own good. I see what they can't. If they just listened, their life would change. But that's how every manipulator begins, with certainty in their own righteousness. The moment you believe you are above others, the moment you start using influence to reshape someone instead of revealing what's already within them, you have stepped across the line. Even if your words are wrapped in love, even if you believe your cause is just. History is filled with movements that began with noble visions, freedom, equality, peace, but became monstrous in execution, not because the tools were evil, but because they were used without accountability. Influence without reflection becomes corruption. So what does ethical influence look like? It starts with humility, knowing that you do not hold the whole truth, that your experience, while valid, is not universal. It means guiding, not dragging, suggesting, not shaming, asking questions instead of issuing commands, creating space for choice instead of coercion dressed as inspiration. It means being honest about your motives, not just what you say you want, but what you actually seek: approval, control, money, belonging, legacy. None of these desires is wrong, but if left unchecked, they can twist your words into weapons. Ethical influence also means remembering that the other person is sovereign, that they are not broken, not clay to mold, not a project to fix. They are an entire universe of thoughts, wounds, longings, and choices. And every time you speak into their life, you are stepping into that sacred space. This is a responsibility, Because your words don't disappear. They echo. They burrow into minds. They plant seeds that may grow into healing or into confusion and dependency. You have felt this yourself. Someone once said something to you that stayed, whether it uplifted or shattered. A sentence, a tone, a belief that took root. Maybe it still lives inside you. Maybe it shaped your path more than any book or class ever could. That's the power of influence. It's subtle, permanent, and far-reaching. So ask yourself, when I speak, am I setting people free or tying them to me? Am I guiding them toward their own power or making them reliant on mine? And when I tell a story, am I opening their world or replacing it with my own? Because the real ethical danger isn't using influence, it's needing it. I need to be the teacher, the savior, the voice. That need will infect everything. It will turn service into performance, connection to control, authenticity into strategy. Influence should never be about control. It should be about reflection, a mirror, not a leash, a light, not a hook. It means being willing to lose followers, approval, even opportunities, if that's the price of telling the truth without distortion. Because the moment influence becomes about keeping power, you've already lost it. The ethical influencer walks a harder road. It's slower, less seductive. You won't go viral for speaking gently. You won't trend for asking someone to trust their own voice. You won't be celebrated for not exploiting pain. But that is the path. Because in a world flooded with noise, ego, and manipulation, integrity is revolutionary. So carry the tools of influence with respect. Speak with precision. Listen with openness. And lead, not by convincing others to follow you, but by helping them remember they already know the way. Because the highest form of influence is not to change others. It's to awaken what's already alive within them. That is power without possession. That is the truth without force. That is love without control. And that is the only kind of influence worth wielding. Chapter 8. Becoming the master of your strings. You've seen the strings, you've watched how they tug at thought, desire, and behavior. You've glimpsed the invisible architecture behind your choices, the narratives that cast you into roles you didn't choose, the language that rewrites your perceptions, and the silent hands that nudge you toward reaction instead of reflection. You now stand at the edge of something rare, the chance to reclaim your mind. This is where many stop. Because knowing the truth is easier than living it, understanding influence is easier than rising above it. It's comfortable to keep watching the game once you've seen how it works. But the real work begins when you step off the stage, when you decide that being a puppet, even a conscious puppet, is no longer enough. The question now is, can you become the master of your own strings? Not in the sense of control over everything, but in the deeper sense of inner authorship, ownership of your attention, responsibility for your beliefs, authority over your own identity. To become a master doesn't mean becoming manipulative, powerful, or untouchable. It means becoming awake, fiercely awake. So awake that no suggestion passes through your mind without being examined. So awake that every decision you make carries the weight of intention. It begins with awareness, not just the awareness of what's influencing you, but the awareness of when and why you are most susceptible. When you're tired, when you're lonely, when you're angry or craving approval. These are the moments when the strings are pulled tight and you move before you know you've moved. To master yourself is to recognize these moments as they rise and breathe into them, to pause before you respond, to name the impulse instead of obeying it. This is not simple. Your biology is quite old. It seeks comfort, cues, and shortcuts. It seeks to choose the easiest route possible. However, you are more than just biology. Consciousness is you. Behind the noise, you are the observer. Additionally, you remember more the more you watch. Regaining the strings also means challenging the unquestioned notions you've held, the ones that were put in when you were too little to fight back, so they feel like the truth. Convictions of the possibilities, about your identity, about how the world functions, or about what you deserve. The deepest strings are these ones. You've mistaken them for your spine, so you no longer even feel them. They're not your spine, though. They are narratives, scripts, memorized and inherited. They are also rewritable. Begin small. Start with your internal language. Notice how you speak to yourself when you fail. Notice the words you choose when you're afraid. Notice the labels you wear and ask who gave them to you. Were they earned or accepted? Then move to your outer world. Observe how others speak to you. What emotions do their words evoke? What roles do they cast you into? What part of you do they try to awaken or suppress? Do they appeal to your power or to your weakness? Do they ask you to think or beg you to follow? Each question is a hand cutting a string, and when the strings fall, something else rises. Stillness. It won't feel like control. It will feel like space, like a clearing in the forest after a storm. The noise will still be there, outside, swirling, but you won't be in it anymore. You'll be beside it, watching, choosing, and from that space, new choices emerge. You might stop chasing what you thought you wanted. You might let go of a narrative that no longer fits. You might begin to create, not to impress or persuade or survive, but simply to express. Because that's what freedom is, unconditioned expression. Movement not from programming, but from presence. This is not about perfection. You'll still be influenced, you'll still be pulled, but the difference is, you'll know. And that knowing breaks the spell. You don't need to escape society, technology, media, or language. You need only to engage with them consciously, to ask, always, is this aligned with who I am when I'm most clear? And if the answer is no, you choose differently. That's the mark of the master. Not force, not dominance, but choice. The ability to choose your thoughts instead of letting them choose you. To choose your focus instead of letting it be hijacked. To choose your role in the story instead of being cast in one without your consent. It is not flashy. It is not loud, but it is powerful. Because in a world that runs on unconscious momentum, a single act of conscious presence is a revolution. So no, you may never cut every string, but you can hold them, you can guide them, you can play them like an instrument. And in doing so, you don't just change your life. You change the rhythm of the world around you. Conclusion. Cut the strings, or use them. So now you know you've walked through the unseen, felt the pull of stories not your own, watched the strings twitch behind your thoughts, tug beneath your decisions. You've looked into the machine that shapes emotion, that scripts identity, that rewards obedience disguised as choice. And here you are, at the edge of the theater, curtain half drawn, breath held. The truth is, there is no full escape. You were born into a world already in motion. Language, history, memory, technology, each of them a thread, woven before your first breath. You can't unweave the world. You can't delete your past. You can't uninstall the systems that raised you. But you can wake up inside them. You can stop dancing to music you didn't choose. You can stop chasing validation that was never yours to begin with. You can stop believing that being seen is the same as being free. Because awareness isn't a door that opens once and stays open. It's a discipline, a daily return to the self beneath the noise, 1,000 small refusals, a soft, stubborn voice inside that says, no more sleepwalking. But what now? You've seen the strings, you've watched the hands. Do you cut them or do you learn to play? That's the final question, and only you can answer it. Because influence isn't going anywhere. The world will not suddenly become silent, pure, or fair. Stories will still be sold. Words will still be weaponized. Algorithms will still whisper. Fear will still be marketable. People will still crave certainty. And systems will still reward the ones who know how to pull the strings. So, do you cut them or do you use them? Because influence, when wielded with integrity, becomes light in the dark. Persuasion, when born of love, becomes liberation. Language, when spoken with clarity, becomes medicine. The puppet master is not always a tyrant. Sometimes he is the healer, the guide, the one who sees where others are blind and dares to speak. So if you choose to use the strings, use them with reverence. Use them to lift, not to bend. Use them to free, not to bind. Use them not to control minds, but to awaken them. Speak not to be heard, but to awaken hearing. Tell stories that heal the fractures, not deepen the wounds. And most of all, never forget that the first mind you must influence is your own, because until you master your attention, your words will echo the voices that shaped you. Until you master your fear, your truth will be stained with insecurity. And until you become the quiet, rooted presence in a world screaming for approval, you'll still be a puppet. Just one who thinks he's free. But you are not a puppet anymore. You are the hand, the one behind the strings. And when you choose presence over performance, truth over technique, love over leverage, then, and only then, the strings become something else entirely. Not tools of control, but threads of connection. Invisible lines from heart to heart, from voice to soul, from one awakening being to another. This is where the game ends. Or maybe, this is where it finally begins.